The problem about sex and gender and women's rights is at three levels. There's a problem with the law, there's a problem with the guidance, the statutory guidance and the non-statutory guidance from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and there's a problem with practice in schools, in hospitals, in health and social care, in prisons, in police, in everywhere where sex matters. The law is not terrible. The law is pretty good, we think. So the Equality Act was built on decades and decades of anti-discrimination law. For example, the Sex Discrimination Act 1975. It brought them all together. It's a little bit messy, but it's not bad. And it protects people against sex discrimination if they're male or if they're female, and it protects people against gender reassignment discrimination if they have a trans identity. And that means that if somebody has a trans identity, they shouldn't lose their job, they shouldn't be denied housing, they shouldn't be denied banking, they should be able to participate in society, and that is right. But human beings can't change sex. The law cannot change a person's sex, and in lots and lots of situations, sex matters. A lot of times people point at the Equality Act and they say, well, the Equality Act says we have to do this, we have to treat a man as a woman. The Equality Act doesn't. The Equality Act, as Kemi Badenoch says, is a shield, not a sword. It doesn't tell you what to do, it tells you what you're not allowed to do. What you're not allowed to do is unlawfully discriminate against people. It doesn't tell you that you have to treat a man as a woman in a changing room, in a hospital ward, if that man is a police officer and has a job searching. There are rules about you should be searched by a person of the same sex. Nothing in the Equality Act overrides that. We do think there is a small problem with the Equality Act, which is where the Gender Recognition Act, which allows a very small number of people to change their sex as recorded on their birth certificate, does that change someone's sex for the purposes of the protected characteristic of sex? We think it doesn't. There's going to be a case in the Supreme Court to decide that coming up in November, but what we want is for the government to make a one-line amendment just to make it absolutely clear that sex in the Equality Act means male or female. Rishi Sunak said that he would do it, that the Conservatives would do it. They didn't do it in time. I'm absolutely furious with Rishi Sunak for not delivering this. He could have done it. Now we have to convince Labour to do it, but it is a cross-party issue, so I'm not giving up hope on that. But in terms of what Conservatives can and should do, practice is really important. There are 57, I think, Conservative-controlled councils. There are 19 Conservative police and crime commissioners. This is not just about Westminster, it's about what happens in practice in local authorities, in schools. And there's much to play for in the next 5 years. Just to give you some numbers, according to the census, some 250,000 people have a transgender identity. At the time when the Gender Recognition Act was passed, the government estimated that 5,000 people had a transgender identity, and that's about the number of people who have got a gender recognition certificate. It's about the same as the kind of numbers of people that go into witness protection. So when they did it, they thought it was like witness protection. They thought it was such a tiny number of people, and they had such an extreme experience in life that you change all kinds of rules for people who go into witness protection, and that's what they thought they were doing. And so they allowed people to change the sex that's recorded on their birth certificate, and for the purposes of marriage, because at the time there wasn't same-sex marriage. That's what they thought they were doing. They didn't think they were breaking the Equality Act. They didn't really think about the Equality Act at all. But as Lottie said, it does mean that legally you can be a woman with a penis. And they just didn't think through, well, what does that mean for hospitals, for schools, for safeguarding, for all of these situations? And so what we want them to do, so when they passed the Gender Recognition Act, the House of Lords said, we've been legislating on sex for hundreds and hundreds of years. There are dozens and dozens of laws that say man and woman and male and female. And the Gender Recognition Act says this extraordinary thing. It says it will change a person's sex for all purposes. it's impossible. It can't do magic. It can change a person's sex for certain legal purposes, and then they put in exceptions already in that act. So they said it doesn't change your sex for the purposes of inheritance of a peerage or inheritance of property. It doesn't change your sex for the purposes of rape, because rape in English law is penetration by a penis. It's a crime that only a man can do, and it doesn't change your sex for the purposes of rape. And then they kind of left for all other purposes vague. It does change your sex for the purpose of marriage, it changes your sex for the purposes of pensions, and everything else was vague. And so the question that we've arrived at now, 14 years after the Equality Act, is does it change your sex for the purposes of the Equality Act? And we think the answer should be no, because only a few thousand people have this. Most transgender people don't have a gender recognition certificate. Employers, service providers, hospitals, gyms should treat people fairly, but they can't treat a trans person, they can't know if a trans person has a gender recognition certificate or not. They can't ask them if they've had surgery. Most transgender people don't have surgery. You can't ask. And so what they should be able to do is to have clear rules to say this lot, you know, the gym floor is for people of any sex, but this changing room is for men, this changing room is for women, and we have a gender neutral changing room, so everyone is accommodated. We're not going to ask you personal questions. We don't care whether you've got a gender recognition certificate or not, but we understand that for the purposes of women taking their clothes off and getting in the shower, that needs to be a female only space. Full stop. And that principle applies everywhere that sex matters. So what we want the government to do is, so as I said, the House of Lords, they said we've been legislating about sex for hundreds of years. They put in a safety clause. They said if there are problems, you can use secondary legislation to basically remove the Gender Recognition Act from any other law. And you can do it with secondary legislation. The power is already there. And that's what we asked the government to do, and that's what they said they would do. The Conservative government said they were going to do, didn't get round to it on time, so now we are asking Labour to do it, and we hope that Conservatives will get behind that, because it will make it just much simpler to be able to say sex is one thing, gender reassignment is another thing. In places where sex matters, it is sex that matters. You can say my name, it works quite well. I think it's really important that local councillors and candidates bring common sense to the fore, because a lot of these issues are decided and governed at a local level, and you can use the Forstater judgment. So this is the judgment which found that the belief that sex is real, immutable and important, which is just the standard everyday belief that, you know, most of your constituents of all parties believe this, is protected under the Equality Act, but also lack of belief. So people who have never heard any of this stuff and they just have the ordinary belief that men are male and women are female are also protected against discrimination. And I have had councillors come up to me today saying, you know, they have complaints against them and they've been able to stand up to them because they have used the Equality Act. So that's one thing. And then the other one is, I want to make the case for the public sector equality duty. The Conservatives should embrace it. The thing about the public sector equality duty is it says that public bodies must not unlawfully discriminate, and when they set their policies, they have to think about people with protected characteristics. Everyone has protected characteristics. People often think people with protected characteristics are like a special group, but everyone in this room has protected characteristics. You all have an age, you all have race, you all have a sex, you all have a sexual orientation, and those things are protected. There's no hierarchy of those things. And the reason why there is a public sector equality duty is to constrain the power of the state, because private entities they also shouldn't discriminate, but they're freer to do what they want, whereas the state is using public money, it's you know, forcing you to do certain things, and so it should think about how that affects everybody. And so actually I think the public sector equality duty can be used to bring back common sense. It's a way of saying don't just think about this very small group and what they want. You have to think about everybody when you're setting a policy about how you collect data, how you organise changing rooms, how you organise prisons. You have to think about all men, all women, everybody with all protected characteristics, and I think it helps rather than hinders.